This past weekend, I played in another over-the-board tournament, my last until the Vegas North American Open. These games were 15-minute by 5-second increment, and there's 4 rounds. And this is how I did. So in my first game here, I'm playing against about a 1680 rated player, and we start off with a d4 opening. I go knight to f6 like I do on my King's Indian defense, and he goes into a queen's opening kind of setup. So I go g6 here, and then I push up to d5 after I get my bishop settled. The engine is always not favorable towards this, but I continue on anyways because it feels like there's not a lot I can do. So going d6 here, and he goes f3, and this is the Samish variation, something that I'm not super familiar with because you don't really see it very often when you play the King's Indian defense. So I castle, doing my thing. He goes bishop to e3, and I go to e6. What I should have done instead is go a6 and stop the knight here on b5. Instead, I go e6 like this, and he goes queen to d2, setting up his battering ram towards his bishop, which proves to be a problem later. And so I finally thrust up into d5, looking to get to c6 and create kind of like a Slav defense kind of structure. From here, he pushes up to e5, hitting my knight, so I have to drop my knight back and going to e8. What the engine said instead is I should have gone here knight to d7. The reason being, after c takes there, I take back, and he takes back here. It's not as bad as what I did later on, because what I did after going knight to e8 is he pushes h4 here. I go knight to d7, and then now that this knight's here, I'm completely blocking everything. I get my knight out here to try to attack this. He obviously gobbles up another pawn, and I get this bishop out. In the moment, I'm like, this isn't terrible. I just feel like he has a lot more activity in his pieces, and I'm in for a world of hurt, which I ended up being because after the king castled, I try to attack the queen and the bishop, completely forgetting that the bishop's there. I should have gone bishop first. And after taking bishop there, he starts his attack over here on my king side. I push up to c6, trying to stop any knight advancement, but that's not even in his plan anyways. He goes bishop, and then I start to push my queenside pawns, looking to, attack this king, but it's just a little bit too slow because after he chops this down, he gets the knight over here on e4. I take this pawn, and it doesn't really help my chances. He's up 7 on the engine right now, and after trading the bishop, he gets the queen involved. He has the h7 check here, and so I bring this rook over here, trying to create some sort of, trying to get a piece here and attack the queen. But after the check, I move my king out of the way. He attacks me there. And I bring the king out thinking that he's going to take this rook here. But instead, he takes the pawn, which is the best move according to the engine. I get the king out there. My rook's still under attack. I then trade off the queens, and he has checkmate. So the first game was awful. I think he had about a 90% accuracy during this whole game, so I was just playing behind and trying to play catch up the whole way, and so it was not good. So my second game here, I play as white. My opponent is black, and he's about a 1600. Even though my opponents are about 1600 and higher, since I'm about a 1350, losing a game's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. I barely lose any elo. Like last week, I think I lost about 7 elo, and so I'm playing against black here. He's about a 1600, and I go into my e4 setup. He goes into Alekhine's defense, so I just push up here on e5. He had obviously drops the knight over here to d5. I go knight to f3, and we trade off the pawns here. And usually in the Alekhine setup, you see this take more often, which which was weird that he went c to d6. So I have the side advantage. I throw a check. He puts the knight there, and I go and start attacking the knight right away. This isn't the best move, but I just wanted to kind of trade off the board as quick as possible and kind of take him out of his prep. I get the strong pawn center. He castles, I get the knight out. I start activating my pieces as much as possible. Get this knight to the center of the board, and I get this knight over here to g5. It's buoyed by this bishop, and I think it has a lot of potential. He thrusts up to e5 here, looking to get me to take d4 to e5, which is what I do. Figuring out that that's just probably the best move. After he takes the bishop, I was expecting a rook take, and then kind of moving out and having to take there, or him creating more pressure. And I just bring this bishop out here, trying to unpin my queen and start my attack of my own. And then he sacks his bishop, which I thought was super weird because I didn't think there was much of a super large attack right off the bat. So after taking, he obviously pushes and attacks my bishop. I bring the queen out of the way, and after he takes my bishop, we trade off the rooks. I take with the pawn because I don't want to take the queen and have, rook activation issues. So he pushes up here to d5. I get my rook activated, and then he offers a trade, which is I will gladly take. I centralize my queen, and then he moves over here to e7, which of course drops mate in 1. Lucky for me, that's all it takes to win. After this move, we played it out, and I think we ended up getting a draw position. So I'm glad he dropped mate in 1 because that was a complete draw position at that point. So my third game here, I'm playing against about a 1650 rated player. He said before the match he wasn't having that great of a day, so I was like, great, I hope I can take advantage of this. He starts off with E4, and I go into my Caro Con prep, and he goes into the advanced variation. Seems all standard. I go into the Botanovic Karl's defense, and he takes. I obviously throws my knight forward on C6. He goes F4, and this is usually where I have issues because it's like, do I bring the bishop out? Do I go to E6? I decided to bring the bishop out, but the best move is not to take, is to go up to E6. Then after bishop to E3 here, you thrust up, attack the bishop. Very sharp line. Still, white has a slight advantage in this variation. So after getting my bishop out to D5, he brings the knight into the attack, and I go H6 here, looking to stop this and create a retreat square for my bishop. However, that's a mistake. He brings out the pawn there, and I go up to E6, and he brings out the pawn to protect this pawn here. I go B6, looking to trade this off, which is what I do, and we trade off the bishops. Everything seems to be dandy here, and I go to trade off my bishop, and after trading it, I feel like I have a good strong pawn structure here, and he pins my knight. I do the only thing I can do, which is protect the knight, but it drops his pawn, so it's not like the best thing in the world, and he gets his pawn back, and I go and attack the queen right away. He drops the queen back, I go knight F5, attack the queen again, he goes queen to D2, I go queen to B6, looking to hit this. Also, like, prevent castling ideas, and he goes G4, attacking my knight, and then I go queen to E3, looking to trade this off. However, this is a mistake. What I should have done instead is go knight to E3 and get my knight into the game, and that gives me a slight advantage from here. The engine's saying the best move is to go A4, and then we go knight to C4 here, attacking this queen and hitting this pawn. So that's what I should have done. Instead, we trade off the queens and go into an endgame where I pick up this pawn, but he still has the advantage according to the engine because you have this nice rook pin here attacking this G7 pawn. And so I decide to keep the knight, and after attacking my knight here, I can then push my knight here that attacks this king, attacks this pawn, and puts me in a good position. He then thrusts the knight forward here on G5, protecting that pawn and dashing all my hopes. So I just improved the pawn structure here. But at this point, I'm running out of space for that knight, and we have to trade off, and I lose a pawn in the process. So my queen side is completely blown up here. It's not looking good. He's up about 3.5 points. And so he just starts to push these pawns and really just kind of push me back. And so I take the rooks off the board, but I just do not have enough pieces to stop this pawn storm here on the queen side, and he starts to gobble up my pawns on the king side, and it's just over from here. So after knight takes C4, I stop taking notation because I know this is over. He ends up checkmating me, and I lose my third game of the night. I'm starting 1 and 2, but because I got that one on the 1600, I'm still expecting an elo jump. I'm hoping I can go 2 and 2 going to the last round of the night. I'm going against about a 1650 here. He's playing as white, and he goes E4, so I go into my con prep, and he goes into the 2 knights attack. So I bring out the bishop over here on G4. Usually what happens when this happens is H3 comes here, prompting the takes, and then you bring up the pawn over here on E6. He goes bishop to E2, and then I just preemptively go E6 anyways to keep this pawn structure. And then after H3, I take the bishop. He takes with this bishop, and I get the knight out here on D7. He pushes up to D4, and I just get my other knight out. And then I kind of run into trouble with the kind of bishop to G5 here, pinning this knight, thinking maybe I can get this queen out here to B6. He castles, and I take this pawn here, which is a mistake just because it gives so much counterplay for white here. Because after protecting the knight here, I just bring it back because I know of the counterplay coming. He takes in the center. I trade off the knight, and he attacks my queen, which is forcing me to drop back. And then after trading the pieces there, I have a strong center, but this rook is now barreling down on the queen side. So that's not something I really want to do. So bishop to F4 attacks my queen. I bring the bishop out here, which then prompts this nice knight move on B5 here. What I should have done instead was, instead of going bishop to D4 or bishop to D6, what I should have done is queen to A5 instead, which then prompts the attack on rook to B6, and then I just skewer these 2 rooks here. Knight takes on D5, and then I prompt a trade of the bishop to this point. After trading, I'm now hitting this knight in 2 locations. He retreats back, and I strengthen my queen side, looking to castle, and we're about equal in that position. However, after D6 here and the knight jumps here to B5, those hopes are dashed. I think, oh, hey, I can take here. He can take my queen. I can take the bishop, and everything is dandy. But I completely forgot that he takes with check, which doesn't allow me to take his queen. So I have to come back and take with the bishop. And from there, it was just trying to survive as much as possible, trying to be as resourceful. and try to, you know, get as many checks in as I can and try to fend this off as much as I could. But what happened was he's able to maneuver the queen quite enough that no matter what I did, he was able to get the win. I finished this tournament 1 out of 4, but the good news is I went up 20 rating points. I'm now at about a 1370 just because my opponents are so strong. So we're getting enough people in our tournaments now that splitting up into 2 groups, and I'm always at the bottom of the top group. So I'm always probably the least ranked person here. After me, the next strongest person is 1600 who I beat here. So these next couple tournaments that are local here are going to be tough for me as I slowly climb up the rating ladder. And I'm hoping with Vegas, since I'm in the 1250 bracket, I'm going to have a lot more success. So if you like that video, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. The Las Vegas Open video will be right here. We'll see you then, and you have a great day. Goodbye.